Alright, YouTube, a little bit of a video about student loan debt. There is an idea circulating currently that that is, the government using taxpayer money, should essentially bail out more or all college students who have loan debt, particularly from my generation, of course, the people in their 20s currently, saddled with a huge amount of debt, and we can go into the reasons why debt is so high right now. I both support and don't support this notion. I think it should be partially merit-based, but I do support the notion of, in general, bailing out student loan debt, and I'll tell you why. Now, before people say, well, you're just one of those bleeding heart liberals, you want taxpayer money to go to people who were dumb and made bad decisions, let's figure a few things out here. The public, by and large, had no problem giving hundreds of billions of dollars to the banks, to the auto companies, and the rationale given, and it was partially sound, and I'll explain that too, the rationale was essentially too big to fail. If we lose these banks, investing will collapse, people will just be terrible. If we lose the automotive industry, by God, we'll have 500,000, maybe more people going on unemployment. It'll crush the local economy of the Midwest. It'll be a terrible, terrible disaster for the country's economy. We'll actually spend less in the long run bailing them out. And these ethos largely were correct. And I say that as a libertarian. When things are mismanaged, sometimes you have no other option but to collectively prop up something which is dying. Or you can just amputate the limb. That brings its own problems as well. Now, I'm not particularly fiscally liberal. I used to be. I've sort of strayed away from that as well and gone more towards the libertarian side there than I used to be as well. But when you have something like that, it's not too big to fail. I mean, the free market would pick up the slack eventually, but it's a case of, do you really want a depression when you could just keep it at a recession level and hope that it gets better? So here we have hundreds of billions of dollars going to these banks. What happens? Oh, well, by the way, we're giving our executives and CEOs $10 million bonuses, and half the money went to a handful of rich people. It was ridiculous. That's the major problem. I didn't have a problem with them making sure the banks would still be there so that the people who had invested wouldn't be completely fucking broke, because it was no fault of their own. The banks were the ones mismanaging things. Nobody ever knew that the banks were doing this. There were a few people who probably had an idea that it was going on. The average investor had no clue. It wasn't the fault of the workers that these automotive factories started to fail. It was fiscal mismanagement on the CEO's parts and on the management's part. So here you have groups of people, largely innocent people, who could potentially suffer without these bailouts. So while they may have been mismanaged, and while there was a level of corruption going on within them, it was essentially fiscally sound. So here's my 2 pennies sort of on the student loan debt bailout idea. It's a good idea. If we can label banks as supposedly too big to fail, on the idea that the investors will get nervous and the United States will lose its credit rating even worse and people will be out in the streets penniless, what about the millions and millions of college students who, through absolutely no fault of their own, have run into untenable levels of debt? And I say no fault of their own, that's very true. What were we all told by our parents? By the way, our parents' generation are the ones largely that are politicians right now. They're the ones running the show. They're the professors. They're the teachers. They're the social workers. They're the everything. They're the ones doing these things. What did all of these groups tell us when we were younger? Go to college. You'll get a good job. You'll get paid a lot more. Don't worry about your student loan debt. You'll be able to pay that off in a couple of years. Don't worry about Go ahead and take as much out from the bank as you want. By the way, you don't have to do any significant paperwork. The government will just come in and give you the money. Everything will be peachy keen. By the way, you should live on campus and you should eat the campus food, which is overpriced, because it may be overpriced, but just be comfortable. Go and party for 4 years. And don't worry about your grades. I mean, you don't have to get straight A's. Just pass your classes and you'll get a good job when you get out. It was sort of the classic, 90s movie or something. Well, I'm a young urban professional. I just got my bachelor's degree in women's studies. I'm sure I'll be fine. And it was a lie. My generation did not understand this concept of debt. That's partially because of the educational system that the politicians and the rich have foisted on us, this rather failed public education system. I say failed not to agree with the teabaggers sort of people who say that we should have voucher system or something. I'm saying it's underfunded and basically run poorly, and that there should be more of a focus on things like civics and economics, mathematics and science. We need to focus more on those things. If kids are graduating and they're illiterate in English, they're going to be illiterate anyway. Don't make them take 4 years of English because they're not going to get anything out of it and they'll barely pass if they pass at all. We were lied to as an entire generation because our parents were probably partially not to blame because they can remember back when college was affordable. They can remember back when college consisted of reading, writing, and arithmetic, sort of, back in the nifty 50s or the trippy 60s or the psychedelically enhanced 70s. They can remember back when college was actually relatively affordable. The government's also partially to blame for the rise in college prices, because when they make these subsidies and loans available to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that has passed through high school or gotten a GED, and tells them to go wild spending, the colleges just up their price. The colleges are also responsible. So we were lied to. When you went to high school, the people from the college came in and said, oh, join our wonderful community. We're all friends. Here are your study buddies. Oh, look at all these wonderful courses. Women's Literature 101. Oh, that sounds pretty good. The anthropology of tobacco farming. I've got to take that. Do-it-yourself sex ed. You know, all of these courses that they have, the largely electoral courses, although they even force people to take bullshit courses. When I went to UVM, I was in the first rung of people who didn't have to take physical education credits just to graduate. They were actually forcing people to take sports. A really lunatic system. We were lied to and told if we just went to college, don't worry about the money. It's all taken care of, and for the trust fund babies, it doesn't matter. For the upper middle class, it's no problem because, of course, their daddies paid for it on credit card. They went off to Cancun every spring break. They had lots of sex. They drank a lot. They did a lot of drugs. That was their college experience. They were just going there to get a degree to their name. They come back, they join the family business. Fuck everyone. Doesn't matter. They're still making a 6-figure salary or high 5-figure salary. They don't care. For those of us in the middle and lower classes, though, it was butchery. Because we were lied to. We were told by the government. We were told by our teachers. We were told by our parents. We were told by the professors. We were told by everybody that we trusted under the sun because we were naive that don't worry about the money, you get a degree, you get a good job, which is bullshit. And then, here's the real problem. The left wing wants to deal with it by saying, well, we need to make more money available to people, more grants and scholarships. Well, that's on paper a great idea. There are only 2 problems with that. Number 1, it just means the colleges will raise their prices again. Because they'll pay their professors a little more, they'll pay their janitors a little more, and then they'll pay their deans a lot more. And they'll spend more money making new worthless buildings that nobody needed. And putting solar panels on statues or whatever. It also doesn't work because it doesn't help my generation that's already out of college. We're the ones that are supposed to be entering the workforce. You want a skilled workforce, and the Republicans are even worse. They're always ranting about, we need to focus more on science and math. Well, guess what? Some of us did go in and take science and math. We still can't find a fucking job. And you, the politicians, and the corporatists and the bankers fucked up the economy. How am I supposed to find a job? You know what my job is? I write because I've got talent in writing and I make money selling books. I'm one of the lucky ones, and I'm not even employed in a 9-to-5 job. Half of them don't have any form of employment. They're literally sitting on the couch, rotting to the couch. They have nothing else to do. The Republicans come out and say, well, they're just lazy. They should have known better than to take out all of these loans. They should have gone to they shouldn't have gone to college. They should have just gone to trade school or community college or whatever. We didn't know because you kept telling us to go to college. You said, go to the state college, go to the university, go have some fun, study hard, you'll be fine. And it was all a big lie to get our money. Well, guess what? We don't have money. We can't find jobs. Even if you were working double shift at Walmart, you still wouldn't be able to make enough to pay off your loans and your taxes and for your transportation and for your food and for your housing. It's impossible. There aren't enough hours in the day to do it. And people are blaming my generation. They were saying, well, go to college so you don't have to flip burgers, and then they come home from college, they flip burgers anyway. They're lucky if they can even get a position at McDonald's. It's ridiculous. Our generation has essentially been ruined because the Gen Xers, they went to college, they had all sorts of cool jobs. And the colleges weren't as expensive, so the Gen Xers were fine. My generation's just fucked up the asshole. And they've taken all of our money already, other than the rich kids that didn't care. Guess what we did in college? Whether we studied hard or not, it made absolutely no difference. It doesn't matter if you got straight A's at a top-ranked university. You might still be unemployed. You might be unemployable. You might have taken the wrong major. Nobody ever mentioned anything about that. They said, well, science and math is good, but all these other majors, they're just as good, and it's a clusterfuck. What we should do is we should bail out the loan debt because none of us have the capability to ever pay it off. If you want to get the economy started again, you have to have people actually buying things. And the Republicans, even the Tea Partiers, they'll agree with me here. If you want the economy to get started, you need to start pumping more money into it. One of the ways to do that is to have people spend more. Well, if I'm making minimum wage and I've got to pay more than half of that total to a loan company, which is basically loan sharking because they continuously add this interest onto a loan, nobody ever understood how the loans work to begin with, and that's fucked up to begin with as well. If I'm paying more than half of my money to the loan company, how am I spending anything on other goods that are propping up businesses? Here's I think I've isolated your problem. An entire generation of people aren't spending anything. They're living off craft dinners. There goes your healthcare system. They're living off craft and the dollar menu at McDonald's, where they probably also work. And it's ruined our generation. So yeah, I think we should bail out this. You owe us something. Now, before the Republicans get all upset about nobody owes you anything. Sorry, but you're the ones who told us to go to college in the first place. You told us you'd get a good job. It was necessary for our intellectual growth. We need strong young scholars to go and get the good jobs so that we don't have to send them to other countries. We have to be competitive with the Asians. We have to be competitive with Japan and South Korea and China and Germany and all of these other smart countries. We have to compete with them. You need to get smart. Well, I did that. 10 million other people from my generation did that, probably more than 10 million people. What else do you want us to do? You told us to go to college so we wouldn't have to flip burgers. There are people who flip burgers at 2 different jobs and still can't make headway on their loans. They will be paying those off. At this rate, they will be paying off those loans until they die. They'll die and still be in debt. Where does that money go? You might be looking at 50 years down the road. The next bubble might be, oh, well, Generation Y is dying off, and guess what? Most of them still have hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans, but they've already loaned that money out to other people and it's not being paid back. The loan companies are collapsing. You can't see why that would be a problem as well. So yes, there's a problem right now. The loan companies are crushing my generation under their feet. If we can bail out the banks and spend hundreds of billions of dollars on them, and we can bail out the automotive companies, we can spend hundreds of billions of dollars on them, why can't we bail out the people that have inordinate levels of loan debt, or at least decrease their loans, or smash them together and cut them in half, or do something to help these individuals get back ahead? I've got loan debt. Oh, I've got plenty of loan debt. I don't have nearly as much as most people. Somehow, I don't exactly know how I did it since I went to an expensive university. I don't know what grants I qualified for that took most of that money away, but I've still got loan debt. There are people with over $100,000 of loan debt, and guess what? Not all of them became surgeons like they wanted to. There aren't enough jobs for us all. They don't exist. There are places where there are almost no jobs whatsoever. The jobs that are there are so shitty you wouldn't even be advised to take them. You'd be better off defaulting on your loans, going to prison, and just going to debtor's prison. Which seems to be what they want to do with my generation. I guess we were too outspoken on the internet, and we were too tech-savvy, and they just want us to sort of huddle in a corner and die. So yeah, we should bail out the student loan debt. Not because society, well, first because society did us wrong by lying to us. Lying to us saying, oh, well, you'll get a good job, Johnny. Don't worry. Go take your women's studies degree. Well, didn't work out too well for little Susan and little Johnny. Maybe 10% of the people got jobs in their fields. Probably got the shittier end of jobs in those fields, but at least they got a decent job. Maybe another 10-20% got a job that's meaningful enough so they can pay off their loans. What happens to the other, like, 70% of us? 60-70% of us that are taking minimum wage jobs or trying to find self-employment or moving out of the fucking country just to avoid this shit. There have been times I've literally thought about simply going to Canada and hoping that the debt doesn't follow me, sort of disappear into the wilderness off the face of the earth. There are times I've thought about that, and I'm sure there are others. I'm sure there have been people who have killed themselves because the phone keeps ringing from the debt companies. They have no way to pay it off. There's no recourse. They go into the military. They might pay off their loans. If they're lucky and they get a job as a cop, they're eligible for some loan programs, or a teacher. There aren't enough positions for that. There are few million positions for a few 10 million people, tens of millions of people. It doesn't work that way. So society, thanks for lying to us. Thanks for telling us that we would, get all of these wonderful jobs that you supposedly promised us. It's worked out really